live on YouTube on the Father Fish channel, so you can pick it up there. What I'm going to try to do at some point is um, scroll through a series of posts that people have made on my Discord channel, and that's what I'm doing right now. There are hundreds of people all around the world who over the last 5 years have learned about this system and have tried it, and our count is 90% have been successful, 10% have not, which compares nicely with the experience of a brand new fish keeper going into a big box store because they want to have fish, because their children are all over their case about a fish tank. So they spend between $300 and $500 to get a 10-gallon tank with everything you need, including fish and plastic plants and gravel. And they bring it all home and they do exactly what they were told to set it all up. And they're thrilled and excited and delighted. And the children are there watching it. The fish are swimming around. They turn the lights out, go to bed. The next morning, they don't look so good. And within 24 hours, everything is dead. So they're back to the store. Oh, you need medication. So another $100 goes out for bottles of stuff. They bring that back, dump it in the tank with some new fish. Thank heavens we did the right thing. 24 hours later, everything is dead. So they're back to the store again. They do that one more time, and then the tank finds its way to the curb. That is the experience of 90% of the people who try to start a fish tank. 90%. 9 out of every 10 fail. They fail completely, they fail utterly, and they want nothing more to do with it. Imagine how big this hobby would be if that did not happen. So we're doing something about it. We're creating an alternative. And the alternative is amazingly simple. Let's see if I can bring some more pictures up here. Can you see?
Yeah.
Is that better? This is our Discord channel. We've got 7,000 people on our Discord channel. It's a massive enterprise. I have very little to do with it anymore because I don't begin to understand it. But I've got people running it who do understand it. And these are pictures of people who have started natural aquariums over the last few years and posted pictures of their aquariums. Now, this is just one small list. These are folks who wanted us to use their tank if we could in one of our videos. And it just kind of goes on endlessly. What I want you to try to see in these pictures is I want you to try to see what is unique. about these tanks. It isn't instantly obvious, but the more you look, the more you see. Who is that? I wonder. Some folks at API. There are all kinds of pictures in here. Mostly it's fish tanks. This main, I don't see any fish in it. It's a brand new tank. Let's see what he says about it. This was just set up. This is same day. That's day one. Here's the system. It's very simple. We start with 1 inch in any tank less than 55 gallons. We start with 1 inch of dirt. Now it's not any dirt. We do have a formula for this. You can use any dirt. I mean, it'll still work. May not last forever, but it'll still work. And then 2 inches of sand. The numbers are important. More than 1 inch of dirt will overwhelm the system in a small tank. It'll be too much nutrient and it'll foul the water. Less than 2 inches of sand, which is double the depth of the dirt, will allow the dirt, which is naturally going to rise up in the sand. It'll only come up as deep as it is. 1 inch of sand will only, 1 inch of dirt will only come up 1 inch into the sand. So with 2 inches of sand, it's not going to get exposed. It will remain out of the water column. So one of the primary reasons for doing the sand is just that, to prevent the dirt from coming into the water column. When Diana Wallstead developed this system back in the late 90s, she had two problems. That was one, the intrusion of dirt into the water column, which creates its own set of problems. Primarily, it allows far too many nutrients to get into the water. And so you have problems with algae bloom, for example, or with other, or needing an excess of plants that take nutrients directly from the water in order to be able to control that. That was one. The other problem was that the soil exhausted itself after about a year because it was leaching into the water. So we did two things about that. I spent altogether 20 years working on a system that would resolve those two issues. I created a shop in Venice, Florida. It's a 4,000 square foot shop. I had 400 deep substrate tanks in the shop. A lot of them were linked together in kind of a chain system. So I wasn't hands into every tank every day. Although it did get to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. But in any case, what I wanted to do was solve the problem of the soil getting into the water column and the soil depleting itself. Amano, when he first began developing the so-called natural tank, sold packets of minerals. If you ever watch one of the old Green Machine videos where he's setting up these massive, magnificent tanks, he would start by opening these little packets from Amano and sprinkling them on the glass. And then the sand and other substrate would go on top of that. Aha! So that then became the way to do it, to add minerals to it. So over a period of time, I developed a package, and I've got some here. Let me grab one of these. This is Father Fish Supplement Additive. This gets added to the soil in a rather small portion. This is currently 12, no, numbers of items. Uh, I think it's 12 different elements are combined in this. The formula is available. We have it online. It's on the Discord. It's not a secret recipe. It's just a really expensive recipe. I spend about $1,000 a month buying the materials to make up about 200 of these. So it's fairly expensive to do it. We sell these for 20 bucks. It's enough to do 100 gallons of 100 gallons worth of tanks, which is kind of a rough estimate, but it works out. So here's the formula then. We start with looking at the soil. What should be in the soil? We want soil. We want humic material, and we want some kind of compost or some kind of rich matter. It could be a composted material. For years, I used black cow. It could be pond muck, mud from a pond. That's, that can be amazingly nasty stuff, but it is rich. One, two, those three items. Soil, that was two. Soil, compost, and the third one is humus, humic material. I've been using peat moss for years. People in Canada are very, and in Europe are very upset with me for using peat moss because it's banned in some countries in that they don't want to deplete the peat bogs by selling off all peat moss. But you can use coir, which is coconut fiber. You can use anything that's humic material. You can use scrunched up leaves. You can use wood chips. Um, I have what's the big bag of stuff? The wood, the humic material that we use in this. Yeah, biochar. Thank you. Right. This contains some biochar, which is a humic material. So, what are the ratios then? The ratios become important. We want primarily humic material. So 50% of the soil is humic material. 25% of it is compost, and 25% of it is soil. And then, so that's the ratio is 2 to 1 to 1 to 1/4. To 1/4, what go to 1/4. 2 to 1 to 1 to 1/4. So if it's 2 cups, 1 cup, 1 cup, 1/4 cup. This is 2 cups. That does a 20-gallon tank. And it'll do 1 inch in a 20-gallon tank. What this does is provide the nutrients, some of which do not become active in, in the environment for years. There is a process whereby they break down, creating gas. The gases are CO2 and nitrogen. We use we use a very strong buffers in this in order to prevent it from becoming acidic because we don't want it to become sulfuric acid. So by keeping the buffers up in it, it doesn't become acidic. That's one of the problems that Wolstead noted in her systems was it tended to become acidic. So the solution for that is just to kick up the buffers to prevent that from happening. And it doesn't happen. What it does is it tends to increase if you have a lower pH in your water, it'll tend to increase it to 7.75, 8.0. We've had some people, it's gone up to 8.2 to 8.2 or a little better. It's still not dangerous for fish, so it holds up pretty well. Let's see, I got off track. Let me let me flip through some more of these while I'm thinking about what I'm doing. If any of you have any questions, just jump in because this is an informal presentation and I really want it to make sense to you. So if it doesn't make sense, if I'm saying something that you don't get, let me know. Did you have a question?
Yeah, could you use any calcium carbonate sand or calcium carbonate, which is typically used for saltwater tanks?
I tend not to. And the reason is that anytime you put any kind of sand in that is not inert, it depletes itself. It simply it gets dissolved into the water column, eventually completely. So I tend to insist on totally inert sand. Now we've been having a problem lately with the black sand, the black blasting sand that's available from Tractor Supply. I've been using it for years with no ill effects. The problem is that there are no controls over where it comes from, how it's produced, and how it's packaged. There's some folks who have been using it who are convinced that it is increasing phosphates and pH in their tank. That's not been my experience. And we're not finished the testing yet. We're not really sure that that even is the case, that that's what's causing it. We think there's some other factors involved. But generally speaking, the the uh, um, the cap material needs to be fine, that is to say, finer than gravel. The problem with doing gravel rather than sand is that water flows through it. And because water flows through it, it tends to pick up nutrients from the soil and bring them into the water column. And part of the principle of this system is to keep that soil dramatically, effectively separate from the water column, such as to be able to maintain. It does two things then. It allows the water column to remain pure. It also allows the sand to act as a precipitative agent, allowing anything that's in the water to precipitate down into the sand and continue its journey down into the soil. One of the complaints that came to me from the Wallstead group is that, and Tom Barr's group, is that it's too slow. And they're absolutely right. It can take for detritus to get through the sand into the soil. That can take a year, 2 years, 3 years. With the supplements, it doesn't matter how long it takes, so long as it happens. It allows that system to then be a long-term system. What tends to happen if you have a very biologically active tank, it will create more malm than the sand bed is able to handle. And so you'll start getting a malm buildup on the surface of the sand. The solution for that is to add another half inch to an inch of sand. And that typically effectively deals with the problem. It provides a bed of sand deep enough to be able to handle the slow flow, if you will, of detritus. Detritus or detritus? What's the
Detritus.
detritus? Of the detritus working its way through. You had a question.
Yeah, you mentioned buffering. What do you use to buffer?
Two things. I use lime and I use bicarb, sodium bicarbonate. And the quantities are about 5% of each in the in of the total. So it's comparable. We also use worm casings, mycorrhiza, bichar, number of other things. But Epsom salts is a critical one because that provides things that nothing else really provides effectively. What else is in there? She makes it all the time. This is Brenda. Pardon?
Blood meal, bone meal.
Blood meal and bone meal, right?
Sulfate,
Ferrous sulfate,
back guano,
bat guano, right? So
Clay
there's a
powder.
fertilizer. I'm sorry,
clay powder,
clay powder, right?
limestone.
Can you hear?
A lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot of work.
Messy. Diet to make this earth.
Right, a lot of diatomaceous earth. That's an interesting one because I started using it before I really understood what it was, and I thought I was putting calcium in. Uh-uh. Diatomaceous earth long ago stopped being calcium. It's a fossilized material, but it has other properties and other mineral value that science has recently discovered that makes it of real value in a garden kind of environment. And that's really the key to this. A big part of the next step then of this process was okay, we've got this, we got the soil, we got the sand, that's what's in this bell jar. Now what do we do? How do we bring life into this? Obviously, we can put plants in it. Then I began studying some of the work that's being done out on the West Coast involving organic gardening, where they are developing bioorganics, excuse me, as a way of being able to grow plants. Well, that just fits perfectly with what happens in an aquarium. There was some research that was done a few years ago in the Amazon where they determined that virtually 100% of the nutrient base, the foundation of the nutrient environment in fresh water comes from the leaves of trees. In virtually every freshwater environment on Earth, except where there are no trees, the virtually all of the nutrients that are in that system are brought in by leaves, which feeds the micronutrients, all the microalgae, the microfauna, the microflora, the bacteria, and so forth. So that's the foundation, and it's tree leaves that do that. So where do we go with that then? Well, that then became a matter of realizing that we could create live culture in the tank by simply introducing leaf mulch decaying material from a pond or a creek and putting it in the fish tank. Now, clearly, there are all sorts of apprehensions about doing such a thing. So we developed the idea of creating what we refer to as a resurrection jar. A resurrection jar is a little bit of muck in some water from the source in a jar sitting on a windowsill, and then observing as countless little animals begin emerging from that muck and begin thriving in that little jar. That then becomes the source of food for very small fish and for uh, uh, macro critters like Daphnia, for example, or rotifers. So it's a kind of a bridge to allow people to feel okay about that and putting it in their tank and then beginning to see, wow, all of a sudden I've got fish breeding in there and the babies are feeding in there, and it's creating a different kind of environment than I ever imagined being able to have. And what kind of environment is that? It's a natural environment. It's an environment that has been well understood in the reef community for decades because they understood from day one that the only way to keep coral alive is with live culture. Live rock became the foundation stone of that, if you will. But it didn't make the transition into the freshwater environment for a lot of reasons. And I think a lot of those reasons have had and have to do with the industry that supports or that enriches itself, depending on how you look at it, on the hobby, on the back of the hobby. They are essentially a manufacturing group. They're not a live aquaculture group, and so they're interested in creating mechanical devices, chemicals, other things that can sit on the shelf for years before they're sold, where there's no loss the way there are with fish and plants and such stuff. And I think the interests have then been exacerbated by the big box stores, which exist clearly not only for the purpose of moving that merchandise, but have the singular effect of, of removing the potential for the ma and pa shop to be able to derive any income from those products. And then you throw Amazon into the mix, and you've got a deadly concoction that makes it virtually impossible for a local shop to survive because all the things that people are looking for, they can get cheaper online or from PetSmart. So they don't go to the local pet store, except at the very beginning when they're buying their fish for their tank, and then they don't go back. I mean, I ran a shop for nearly 20 years. And what I noticed is I would see people who would come in, I would set them up to be able to do this kind of system. Day one, they never had a tank in their life, didn't know a thing about it. Teach them how to do this, send them home with everything. They set it up, they come back and get fish and plants, they put them in, and then they might come back a week or two later to get another pair of fish, maybe a month or two to get a few more. And then I wouldn't see them again, ever, because that tank would last for years. It's a the 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 solution to that problem is to teach people that it's okay to have MTS, that that's a healthy condition. And when they complain about it, the answer is there's always room for one more tank. And there's a good example. Um, Somebody in the back had their hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
That supplement that you're talking about, so you're saying add that to the dirt or use that?
Add that to the dirt, yes. Yeah, that goes in with the dirt. Um, and this Discord, we've got a lot of resources on Discord explaining exactly what this is, how to do it, what the live culture is. Another thing we're doing, we have a group on Discord that are putting a book together that's going to cover all of this stuff. We hope to have the first section of it, which will be about leaves, available by the end of the year. It'll be available initially as a PDF, probably on Patreon, since we've got a Patreon link there. Somebody in the back, and then I want to get back to you. Yeah.
What you said about dirt, don't use any type of dirt. What type of dirt do you use?
Well, I use three. It can be any kind, but it needs to be optimally. You can use anything you want, and it probably will work fine for a while. Eventually, it may become depleted. Although if you've got a lot of plants, it's not really going to become depleted all that quickly because plants die off, and as long as you're not trying to keep the thing super clean, they'll be able to cycle through. But again, peat moss as a predominant kind of a foundation, soil, and I've got a guy in Brazil putting this together using the South American black earth. What's that stuff called? Terra something. It's a dirt that the ancient people in South America developed that enriches soil. Terra.
That's cool. From Brazil?
It's all over South America.
Oh, okay.
Pardon? No, nobody's coming up with it. I'll think of it in a second. Anyway, Terra, what was it again? That's right, Terra Preta. He's using it in his. I have a fellow in Brazil that's manufacturing this and selling it throughout South America. Also got somebody in Scotland who's selling it in the UK and Europe. We've got a guy in Canada also selling it. So I'm not trying to push this internationally. I'm trying to get people in different countries to put it together and make it available locally. Talking with some people now in Australia, trying to get that going. Don't have it going yet anywhere in the Golden Crescent, but I think it will soon. We've got some Philippine and Indonesian people and Indian people who are interested. So I'm not now those lines. What I'm trying to do is help those people develop that and market it and ship it with no return to me. I'm not looking to make a penny on that. I want them to be able to develop a viable income by being able to do that in their country. I do get orders from people from all over the world wanting to know if I can ship to them, and it's nice when I can give them a local a local contact to be able to do that. Yeah, right here.
Does it matter with the leaves, if any type of leaves? Because there
Good
are certain
question.
ones You should not,
You should never pick leaves off a tree to do it, or
I
pick
mean,
them
the
off,
type of leaf.
or pick them off and dry them.
Uh,
Because the leaf that falls this time of year, the reason they turn colors is because the tree is drawing all of the sap, all of the nutrients out of the leaves, all the fluids, that is, drawing them all out of the leaves, leaving the leaf dead and dry. That then falls to the ground. If you pick leaves off a tree and throw them in the tank, it'll be so much sugar in there, it'll fill the water. I mean, you can do it if you're extremely careful. I don't even try it, and I don't recommend it. I've had the problem with driftwood that was not cured, big thick pieces in a tank that fouled the tank. So I learned what happens when you do that. Now, the leaf on the ground then is is nutrition for the animals that need to be brought in. And here's the thing about the whole issue of diversity, of biodiversity. By bringing in culture from the wild, you're bringing in culture that has been developing in that environment for a very long period of time, hundreds, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of years. And so it's a very rich culture. One thing you might not know is that this biological material, these microfauna and microflora, exist everywhere on Earth. They know no boundaries. They're tiny enough and they've been around long enough to have been able to disperse in every environment that is at all friendly to them. Obviously, some environments they're not going to be in because they can't live in them. But if there's an environment anywhere on Earth that an amoeba can live in, that very same amoeba that we have here will be found there. So being able to take microfauna from a rainforest in South America, or more likely from the cold water of North America, and put it in a tropical tank does not stress the animals at all because they exist universally and they can exist in all of those environments. The question that comes up most commonly is, what about parasites? Well, I've done some work on parasites and discovered that 50% of the microfauna that exists is a parasite. It thrives on some other form of microfauna. So how do they all survive? Well, they control each other. They achieve a balance by being able to have enough of a diverse environment to be able to provide effective controls over the development of one thing over everything else. For example, if you're trying to maintain a pristine aquarium, perfectly clean, nothing in it at all, what's the worst thing that can happen? A fish dies. And then what happens? Bacteria explode. The bacteria go wild because there's nothing there to control them. In an environment that has biodiversity in it, that doesn't happen. you don't get an explosion of monoculture because there's too much else going on in there to control that controls the explosion of that one animal. So a white, but when somebody says to me, "What about parasites?" My answer is, you have a better chance of having a problem with parasites in a sterile tank than you do in a tank loaded with biodiversity. Because the biodiverse tank is going to be able to control the explosion of parasites. Here's a good example. Ick. We've we've all nearly, who here has never had ick in the tank? We have one, two, two. Pretty common, pretty common problem. The problem with ick, of course, is that it's a parasite that matures, lays eggs, 240 of them. They grow, they mature they hatch in a day and are in the water column 24 hours after they're laid. Find a host. 2 days later, they drop each one of them 240 eggs. By 1 week, you're dead in the water. In 1 week with ick, if you don't catch it, everything is hopelessly drained of its bodily fluids. It is, after all, a vampire. It sucks the blood right out of, sucks all the juices right out of the fish. Now, in a biodiverse tank, you don't get that kind of ick explosion. You may get one or two, but it's not going to come back as an explosion because there will be so many other little critters in there that will attach themselves to that baby, will feed on it, that it simply won't have a chance. I have a 23-year-old tank. It's a 30-gallon long. It's in virtually all of my videos. I got some cardinals from the Clash. Put them in there, gorgeous fish. They brought it in. I think it was them. I noticed it. I didn't do anything right away. By day 2, the spots were gone. Never saw another one. Didn't come back. All of the little ones that had hatched were taken care of by the other animals living in there. Now, I don't recommend that you trust that implicitly, but what I was looking to see was whether I was going to have a problem, an infestation problem, and I did not. And I'm convinced that's why. Now, it might have been just a bogus thing. Maybe they didn't have it. I'm pretty sure I know what it is. Pretty sure I can tell when I see it that it's not something else. So I believe that's what it was, and I believe that's what happened. I've never had ick in that tank or in any of the other tanks that I've had set up in this way.
Have you ever had planaria in your tank?
I have. There are about 100 species of planaria. There are only 2 that are a problem, and they're a problem primarily with shrimp. They never kill fish. They will attach to a fish, but once they get enough in them, they drop to the bottom. If you have little fish in the tank, they eat them.
Will handler live bearers eat them? Or
Yes.
rummy nose tetras?
Tetras will eat them. Handlers will eat them. Yeah.
I just found them yesterday.
Yeah, they'll get eaten up. It's the other one is aptasia. It's you almost never find aptasia in in a tank that has fish in it. You'll find it in saltwater tanks because there's nothing there to eat it.
I did a 1/4 water change yesterday.
Yeah.
And I found, I really stirred up the gravel a little bit. And when I was all done, I ended up with about a dozen planaria all over the glass.
Huh.
Should I not worry about it?
They've been in there for a long time. They're probably also not, most planaria are not, most planaria are detritus eaters. They're down in that gravel eating dirt. They're not attaching themselves to anything. There are only one or
Shrimp-
two species that
I've
do
got
that.
about 3 dozen shrimp in there.
And they're doing fine. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
Boy, that's good to hear.
I think you're home free with that one.
Keep the tank a little less for a few days, maybe you might be overfeeding the tank.
I didn't think I was. I don't
Well,
know.
probably not. I mean, the likelihood is that they're acting as a cleaner. You know, they're really a benefit to the tank because they're breaking down waste and allowing it to cycle.
I had put in some mini algae wafers,
Yeah,
and 3 of them went wild over there.
right to it. Well, that demonstrates
shrimp-
what they are.
The
then.
shrimp wouldn't go near it. With,
The algae wafers.
well,
Oh, you mean the
with the
planaria? Then.
planaria on it.
That could be. That could be.
So I was wondering
I'll tell you what the solution is.
what,
Add sand to your gravel.
add sand to it?
Put an inch of sand on top of it.
Okay.
And that'll do a number of things. Number one, it'll clarify the water. You'll notice a difference in the water. Pardon?
The water's crystal clear.
Yeah. You'll notice a difference there. It'll also allow all the waste that's going down in there to stay down. It'll hold it down. So it's going to prevent the water from flowing through that gravel. It sounds like you've created a balance there. Probably the planaria
It's fully planted.
are a part of that balance. It's planted.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. I don't recommend tanks that are not planted. I recommend planted tanks for everything except silver dollars.
But
Yeah.
as I've been reading, like somebody said to me, suggested no planaria to get rid of them, or praxicro.
See, that's a good example of, look at this. This tank, that's Cuba growing in there, and it's growing in sand. I know this tank. It's been growing in there for a year. It's sand, it's 2 inches of sand over an inch of soil. The tank is 2 years old. He's had the Cuba in there for about a year, and it's covering the bottom.
So you never actually use one of those siphons to clean up.
Never. You never touch it. Leave it absolutely. You never clean the substrate. Absolutely never. In fact, you want to be gentle with it. You don't want to even stir it up. Obviously, it gets a little stirred up when you're putting plants in it and moving rocks around and such stuff, but it'll settle out pretty quick.
I've got fluorite in there now. So just cover it with sand.
I would add an inch of sand.
Okay.
You know, it's certainly not going to hurt anything. And it'll benefit the plants. Yeah, it'll benefit the plants enormously. There's a really interesting discussion going on about anaerobics in tanks. The people who want gravel are convinced that plants need oxygen. Well, the research that's been done, particularly in pond environments, has discovered that when you get down below 1/4 of an inch, it's totally anaerobic. There's no oxygen there at all. What oxygen is there is bound up with plants, with the water, with whatever other organic is sifting down in there. And so the bacteria will work that and pull the oxygen out to use it to do their thing. And that's then what creates the nutrients for the plants. But the plants, for their part, are creating hormones that they're releasing through the cilia of the roots in order to trigger bacteria to create the specific nutrient they need at that stage in its development. So it needs different nutrients when it's growing roots or stems or leaves or flowers. If you put fertilizer in there, you shut down that system and you provide only one form of nutrient that allows maybe the plant to explode with growth, maybe leaf growth at best, because that's what most of the fertilizers are geared toward, but it doesn't allow the plant to grow naturally and normally. It'll make it grow faster even, but that isn't necessarily the best thing for the plant. I'm sorry.
If you, I've already got fluoride in there, and I've been adding once a week a little bit of flourish. because
Yeah, if you will put sand in, you won't need to do that ever again.
Will I have enough nutrients? And then if
Yeah,
just the
because
fluoride?
because the waste from the plants, don't clean it anymore. Once you do that, don't clean it. Don't go there and siphon out all the waste.
Right.
In fact, if you add some leaves to it, that'll kind of hide it a little bit, make it look a little more attractive, so it won't bother you so much. And that then provides the nutrient foundation
Yeah.
for the system. It's a matter of thinking differently. It's a matter of thinking nature rather than thinking plastic.
Are your tanks CO2 infused?
Never.
Okay. Do you put Excel in there or anything like that to?
But what? No. And the reason is that the substrate creates far more CO2 than any mechanical device possibly could.
But
And
if
so the plants are getting all the CO2 they need right in the substrate.
if I just cover my fluoride with sand, will I have enough nutrients in it? Oh, good to know.
Not only will you, but what's there will stay there, but what is being created through fish and plant waste will also precipitate into that and increase it.
Will the sand keep the planaria in that substrate?
That's interesting. I don't know what's going to happen with the planaria. They may not like the sand. They may find themselves on the surface. I don't know if they can negotiate sand because they're kind of big. I don't know. Be interesting to see. Call me, let me know.
Sounds good.
I like it. Yes.
I've used fluoride, it's a good substrate, it's like a lifetime substrate. You can use it all the time, and I've gravel back too. In her situation, I don't know how many gallons is your tank?
29 gallons.
Would you recommend like cleaning that and trying to get rid of some of that planaria so that you don't cap
No.
it off? And
No.
once you cap off the fluoride, you really can't.
I wouldn't worry about it. It's a nutrient.
Wouldn't she be better off?
I recommend when you have a dead fish that you push it down into the substrate.
Because I had a personal nose plethora that died.
It tends to blow minds, actually.
Yeah, I'm worried about my shrimp population.
Because of the area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably is going to get rid of them. Putting the sand in there will probably get rid of them because they'll be. Right now they're hiding in the gravel.
Yeah.
The fish can't get to them. You put sand in there, they're going to be
On top of the.
gobbled up. Yeah.
Oh,
I think I lost. Oh, here we are.
Takes time to update.
I'm sorry?
It looks like it just takes a second to update.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's an example of a plastic cube that it's about half full of water with plants growing up out of it, emergent, and it's got looks like about an inch and a half of dirt and sand substrate in the bottom, and a lot of tannins, very dark water. Wonder if we're still live on.
So,
Guess we are.
so all these tanks don't have like external filtration. They're just,
Generally, I recommend sponge filters. The sponge filter it creates water movement, and that's important. Um, and it also creates an additional uh, media, an additional filter media, or with the sponge. I just see it as beneficial. And, a purist would try to not have any kind of mechanical anything, and I've done that. Um, but it's safer to have a little bit of water movement than to not have any at all. In fact, I got myself in serious trouble about a month ago. I had 4 3-inch discus and a 29. There was a deep substrate, tank about a year and a half old, and they were doing miraculously well. Um, Temperature about 85. I noticed them one evening. I got real cocky about it. No water changes, feeding 3 times a week, and they're just vibrant, doing really well. These are some fish from super cichlids uh, that were culls. They have a tank of culls that are pretty fish. They don't want to kill anything, so the stuff that's not quite so nice, they just sell off cheap. And for a fish like that, it makes it nice. So I got 4 and put them in there. One evening, I noticed I put a little food in. They didn't rush to it. I was tired. They were hovering in a corner, and I just thought, well, I'll get back to it in the morning, whatever it was. By morning, they were dead. The air had gone off. I have glass tops on my tanks, and the airline had gotten squashed and cut the air off. And with the temperature that high, it deprived the tank of oxygen. It was loaded with plants, just thick with plants. And they didn't make it. And I about cut my head off over it. I mean, it was pure carelessness that I let that happen. But lesson learned. So yeah, I try to keep a little bit going in my tanks just to be safe. Yes.
Any substitution for the water aside from chlorination?
No, not at all. Well, if you have chloramines, you're kind of stuck for doing something because you need to break that molecule. It's a bugger. I don't really understand the I don't understand how municipalities get away with putting that level of toxin, indestructible toxin, in water just to get rid of bacteria that might be in the pipe system. Because it's deadly. It sells a lot of bottled water, you know,
And water too.
and water, yeah, same problem. Uh, Not many municipalities use it. Is it used here? Are they putting ammonia in the water here? Just pure chlorine? That's not an issue at all. Chlorine, in fact, I don't even use chlorine tablets anymore. When I put water in the tank, I have it on a nozzle, and I turn it on spray and spray the water in, and as the water's going in, the yeah, it just dissipated.
How often do you do water changes?
About once every 3 to 4 months typically, and I'll do maybe 25%. And that's more to make me feel good than anything else. I'm not sure it's really critical. There is, my sense is, there is a buildup of organics in the water over an extended period of time. I'm one of those fanatics who believe in water memory. I believe that water retains um, uh, a homeostatic relationship with what's living in it, that it changes accordingly. And so I don't want to get rid of that because I think that the water becomes more kind of the water and the fish bond. You know, they create a more harmonious balance the longer they're together. But my sense is there's an organic buildup that occurs in a closed system that simply requires that it be stripped off. Now, it's really the same justification as anybody doing a bare tank and weekly water changes. I mean, that's why they're doing it, is to get rid of organics. So, and that's certainly a legitimate thing to do. If you got fish in a bare tank, you must do water changes. If you don't, you're creating pollution on a continuing basis that at some point will overwhelm the ability of the water to support life. Yeah.
So in your natural aquariums, between your 3 or 4 month water changes, so you just peel off evaporation with fresh water?
Yeah, and I keep glass pretty tight on all my tanks to control evaporation. I get refrigerator shelves, my new favorite source of glass. I'm on the lookout for refrigerator shelves. It's it's tempered glass. It's polished. Usually has a beveled edge on it of plastic or something, so you don't cut yourself on it. It's wonderful stuff. It's hard. It's hard to break. If it does break, it doesn't shatter. It just kind of disintegrates. Nice stuff. Perfect. And it's thick. Yeah.
Do you ever use the Indian elm leaves along
Sure.
with your regular
Yeah,
leaf
that
litter?
kind of gets back to the earlier question about the kinds of leaves. Yeah, that's one type of leaf. I have used it. Um, Oak leaves are very similar. What's the other? Magnolia leaves are also very similar to those. What you want is a mix of different kinds of leaves that break down at different rates. Maple leaves, for example, and most fruit tree leaves break down very quickly. In a matter of a few weeks, they're disintegrated. They're eaten up. Oak leaves and the leaves you're talking about, thicker, coarser leaves, will take
Club-shaped
longer.
leaf, yeah.
Pardon?
In the world of bettas, I keep bettas, in Thailand and Vietnam, they take dried palm fronds. They just lay it across the top and supposedly it creates a tremendous amount of infusoria where for the first month they don't feed them at all.
That's exactly
Until they get
right.
bigger, yeah.
That's
They
right.
use dried palm fronds. It also produces an oil that supposedly coats their skin, keeps parasites off of them.
Mm. The That's the real benefit of doing the leaf culture, doing what I call a food web, because it creates that foundation for baby fish, and it makes it possible that if you do it right, you'll wind up with upwards of an inch of this leaf mulch on the bottom of your tank, if not on the whole thing, in certain areas in it, that will harbor then baby fish the fish like tetras will lay their eggs in it. Those fish will hatch and they'll be able to not only escape predation but find food.
If I, if I put an inch of leaf mulch on, then do I need sand?
Yes, they're totally different things. It's a good question. Um, yeah, what the leaf mulch is doing, thank you. What, what the leaf mulch is doing is providing a nutrient foundation that's precipitating into the sand. So the benefit of that sand and soil is to break down the waste and to convert it to plant material. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, it's kind of a two-part question. What are your thoughts on monitoring your water quality with TDS, no dissolved solids? And in your, we're running tanks, well established, 3, 4 years, nothing done to them. What, in your tanks, what is your TDS run?
Yeah. TDS and nitrates. Nitrates are the other one. Nitrate, did I say? I meant to say nitrate. Um, the whole issue of measuring, I have a box about that big with hundreds of little bottles of stuff for measuring almost everything that they've sold stuff to measure for. I will go rooting through it periodically, looking for bromothal blue to check the pH. That's about all I ever check is pH. When I had my shop, I had about 400 tanks in there, deep substrate tanks. And periodically, about once a year, I would check TDS and nitrate. My TDS, the TDS coming to me through the water supply was about 125, so it was fairly high. It would get up to 250 plus. My nitrates would get up to 400, but I never had a problem with anything in there because